Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name's Chris. We're going to take a flight today along the coast to Hope Cove and Thurlestone. My man Dave is getting the aircraft ready. He's been on a bit of a diet. He's on some exercise routines and he's speeded up a bit. Thanks Dave. Let's get going. Hold tight.
The first shipwreck we're going to take a quick look at is the four-masted windjammer, the Herzegovina Cecile. She was the proudest, the largest and the fastest of the windjammers. Excuse me. She met her doom on the fog-bound rocks at Sawmill Cove in the early hours of Saturday morning. It was the most disastrous wreck which has occurred in the South Hams for many years. With the channel blanketed with a thick swirling mist, she struck a reef of rocks between the Hamstone and the shore at 3:50 a.m. Her hull was pierced, water was pouring into the hold, and within a few hours her fate was sealed. This was May the 1st, 1936. Captain Sven Eriksson, the master of the Herzegovina Cecile, and his South African wife, formerly Miss Pamela Bourne, who had just completed their honeymoon trip, steadfastly refused to leave the vessel and remained on board for several days, making only occasional trips ashore by means of the breeches buoy. It was not until Monday that Captain Eriksson reluctantly accepted the opinion of local men, well versed in the perils of the coast, that the ship must be regarded as lost. He and his wife had clung vainly to the hope that their beautiful vessel could be extracted from her difficult position and patched up. They bowed to the inevitable, however, and entered upon the mournful task of stripping the ship of the lighter gear and salvaging a proportion of the 4,500 tons of wheat on board. When dawn broke, just about everybody and his aunt had turned up to view the wreck, and quite a lot thought they should go on board. This considerably hampered the rescue operation, but in the middle of all this, Salcombe lifeboat took off 22 of the crew, leaving just the captain, his wife and 6 crew members. A breeches buoy was rigged up to take off all the luggage and personal belongings, but most of this was quickly stolen when it was landed by members of the public, who had by now degenerated into something of a mob. 7 long weeks the Herzegovina Cecile lay stranded on the Hamstone, whilst her 4,500 tons of grain rotted and fermented. The stench was appalling, and fears of it polluting the beaches around Salcombe kept the owner and the local council arguing fit to bust. Every day huge crowds gathered to view the Duchess, and local farmers made a fortune charging people to cross their land for a better look. Eventually the grain became so swollen that it started to crack the decks, and this seemed to galvanise the salvage attempts, and by the 7th of June enough of a rotting cargo had been removed to allow installation of powerful pumps, and on high tides tugs repeatedly attempted to pull her off. At first it looked like the Duchess was stuck, but finally on the 19th of June the Herzegovina Cecile floated clear of the Hamstone. The Herzegovina Cecile was towed around to Stairhole Bay, and still Salcombe Council would not allow the ship to be taken into harbour. Sadly, she was beached in Stairhole Bay, where she met her fate in a very, very, very bad storm. A sad ending to a very beautiful ship. I have to say, it's not very often that one comes across a ship abandoned on the beach with all her sails set, but that's what happened to some early morning walkers on the 7th of May 1908, when they came across the Scottish registered brigantine Crosshaven adrift on Yarmouth Sand. The Crosshaven had embarked a cargo of china clay at Par the previous day, and it can only be assumed that when she left port she became enveloped in a dense bank of fog that had blanketed the southwest coast that day. She ended up far too close inshore and struck Burr Island. The crew, thinking that they were sinking, launched the ship's boat and rowed for the shore. Unfortunately, they rowed towards the mouth of the nearby River Avon and became overwhelmed by the breakers on Bantham Beach. all were thrown into the crashing surf, and it was only later that their drowned corpses were plucked from the waters around the River Avon mouth. At least 6 bodies are buried in Thurlestone churchyard, together with an unknown boy who, whilst not on the official crew list, was presumed to have been aboard. Their communal grave was erected by public subscription from the local villagers. Later, a separate stone for the captain was placed nearby. The wrecking of the Belgian steamer, the Louis Chied, could almost be described as a Victorian tale of virtue going unrewarded. The Louis Chied, on her way home to Antwerp in the early morning of the 7th of December 1939, came across the remains of the stricken freighter, the Tangerine, sinking off the south coast of Devon. The Tangerine had been torpedoed or struck by a mine. In any event, there had been a terrific explosion in the engine room and she'd gone down very rapidly. Even so, most of the crew and passengers managed to get off the ship and into lifeboats. Unfortunately, 800 tons of fuel oil had been released in the explosion and lay in a vast spreading pool about the ship. As the lifeboats left the floundering ship, flames from the fiercely burning engine room shot up out of the Tangerine's funnels and set fire to the oil all around on the sea. The lifeboat crew, sizing up the situation, rowed like demons with huge flames roaring all about them, with the fire threatening to burn their very oars and with the passengers frantically beating off the flames. It was touch and go. Anyway, the Louis Chied, together with the Italian steamer the Georgia Olsen, managed to pick up about 40 survivors, of which some were transferred to the Louis Chied for transport back to Antwerp. Although neutral ships, the Louis Chied was taking a considerable risk stopping in waters so much favoured by the U-boats. However, the visibility was very poor, and once all the survivors were safely on board, the master of the Louis Chied decided to minimise the risk from any possible submarine attack by clinging close to the Devon shore. With the good deeds just performed, Providence should have ensured a safe passage home. Alas, the Louis Chied Providence forsook them. As the day turned to night, heavy rain, squalls and the complete absence of any shore lights made conditions extremely difficult. The Louis Chied, now unknowingly too close to land for safety, sailed on into Thurlestone Bay, struck a rock and was stranded on a reef, directly under what was then the old Links Hotel. To make matters worse, a southerly gale had started to blow and huge waves were forcing the ship even further onto the rocks. With great skill, the Salcombe lifeboat managed to get out to the Louis Chied and effect the rescue of everyone on board, some 62 in all. Since the Louis Chied had struck at a low tide, there was every hope of salvaging her. But, alas, as she floated off the rocks at high tide, the huge waves smashed her broadside onto the cliffs and wedged her even more firmly. In the end, she defied all attempts to save her and was abandoned. Later, she broke in two and was extensively cut up and salvaged piecemeal. A very sad end to a very brave ship. And because the Louis Chied foundered so close inshore, this wreck now makes an ideal shore dive. And you can get to it from one of the beaches either side of the point, of which where the old Links Hotel is sited. But now, as is with many sad properties, it's been converted into luxury flats. On our return flight back to the former RAF Bolt Head, we'll take a quick look at the RAF radar station Bolt Tail, which was established here in 1941. It's just a quick look, and we'll come back to it in more depths sometime later in the next films. I really hope you've enjoyed this journey, and I look forward to seeing you on the next film. I'd really appreciate it if you could have a ponder about subscribing, and give all the support you can to my dear old friend Fat Dave, who is a dear soul, and he's very, very helpful all around the airfield.
Dave, for crying out loud, yes, you're very pretty. Why have you got that hat on? You can't fly the plane. Come on, get out. You're a nutcase. Stop grinning at the camera. Get the hangar doors open.